Hey there, Floralpreneurs. It's Alison Ellis here of realflowerbusiness.com with a newbie tip for you. April is all about newbie tips, and so I got another newbie tip for you. And this is another newbie tip that's not just for newbies. This is a question I got last week on cutting flowers from your own garden to use in weddings. How do you do it? How do you go about cutting and processing flowers to use in your weddings? This questioner asked me, I feel like the flowers are gonna die, which is counterintuitive because they should be the freshest, right? So a couple of pointers about using your own fresh cut flowers in your arrangements. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in, thanks for being here. So you don't have to be a farmer or a flower grower to have stuff in your garden that you can cut and use. So I started making a little list of some of the things that I cut and use. I don't know if you can really see it behind me right now. I've got a couple of sprigs of honeysuckle. This was a tricky one. When he was a little baby, he looked like a lilac. I was like, oh, this little lilac, I'm gonna dig it up and I'm gonna plant it over here by my studio. And then this little lilac wasn't a lilac, it was like a honeysuckle thing. And I was like, what's this? It was kind of scraggly for years until it grew into this big bush. I've been cutting it back lately actually, because it just got really scraggly up at the top. But it is this lovely little honeysuckle. I've used it in photo shoots. I've used it in a couple of like ceremony arrangements. I wouldn't put it in centerpieces or bouquets necessarily. But yeah, this little fake out of a plant that I thought was a lilac turned into a honeysuckle. And just when I was pruning it the other day, I just sort of grabbed a couple of branches off of it. So things I cut: mock orange, limelight hydrangea. I cut mint and oregano from my garden. Coral bells, coreopsis. I really love not necessarily the flowers so much. My flowers don't get very big here, but the foliage can be so perfect sometimes. Like I have a variety that has this beautiful kind of burgundy foliage, and it can be just the right touch every now and again. A stilby, that's something that grows in the shade too, which is kind of nice. A stilby, something that I find that is hard to get in looking great for my supplier, and it's not a diss against my supplier. I just don't think it ships well. I think it really has to be cut at like just the right moment or it starts to shrivel and die pretty quickly and easily. So I like to cut that from my own garden. Hosta. I'll just use hosta leaves. Not even fancy, beautiful hostas, like literally any hostas that I've got. Those leaves can be a lifesaver from time to time. I already mentioned lilacs. I cut lilacs from my garden. When I moved to our house almost 18 years ago now, when we moved in, there was a lilac, right? And it was fall. So I didn't know what color the lilac was, but I knew we had a lilac and I was so excited. And then it was a white lilac. I found out in May it was a white lilac. And I was honestly disappointed, right? I was like, what? It's not lavender, it's not purple. And now, it's been one of my favorites over the years because I don't always have purple or lavender weddings, but I can almost always need something white. And so from time to time, that white lilac has saved my tush, okay? Has saved my tush. Smoke bush. I love cutting smoke bush from my garden. It took several years for mine to get established here in Vermont, where I really felt where it was doing the inflorescence and doing that, fun, poofy, smoky thing. But I really, really love that. So Cotinus cogigreus, I recommend highly for your home garden. And then I cut things like branches. I cut apple branches. I have a pear tree. I think I already mentioned mock orange. I use mock orange from my garden when I see it. All right, now I'm just going to go through my brain. What other things? I don't usually use the irises from my garden, but I could technically if I wanted to. I love the, I'm blanking on it. Oh, Solomon seal. Love me some Solomon seal. Also grows well in the shade. Lily in the Valley. When I moved in, there was a huge patch of lily in the valley. It's really kind of disappeared over the years. I've planted it in a couple of other spots, so I have some, maybe they'll reestablish. But lily of the valley is something that I will pick from my own garden to use. Again, it's not really blooming here until May. Other than that, sedum, love sedum. I love little succulents in the garden. Those are perfect for boutonnieres and corsages. Bee balm I like to cut from the garden. So yeah, those are like my main sort of go-to things in the garden that I grow and cut. Lady's mantle. I love lady's mantle. Let me throw that out there. I also have a quince. Quince is something that is a branch that will flower that's in my garden. So anyway, that's my little rundown of the things that I grow that I will pick. And again, I'm not a grower, so I don't have a ton of it, but I'll be able to go and seasonally pick out things as they're in bloom from around my garden. So tips on how to do it. You know, I used to work at an organic flower farm, so I remember and I learned a lot of things about cutting from working on the flower farm. What I remember as a farm worker was, you know, I kind of knew the difference between whether something was opening or on its way out. I remember that being one of the advantages that I had when I came into the job and worked on the flower farming side of the farm. So you really want to know about the maturity of your blooms. Are they developed enough to cut them? Are they going to live after you cut them at this stage? Kind of like the astilbe that I mentioned earlier. Is it too open where now that you've cut it, the vase life is going to be super short? Or is it not developed enough yet where even if you cut it and put it in a vase, nothing really all that special is going to happen because it doesn't have enough energy stored up in the stems to actually do something once you cut it and put it into a vase. So, you know, here's an example of that. Somebody in my Facebook group just today posted pictures of campanula, or as someone once said, campanula. And it was, or they were Canterbury bells. They're supposed to be purple, this variety. You can tell, because they're not, they're green. And they said, you know, I really thought these would be a little more mature. Are these going to open? And one of the floralpreneurs in my group said, you know, I used to cut flowers, I used to work on a farm, and check and see, are there like 3 mature flowers at the base of this? Because if there aren't, it was probably cut too soon. And just at a glance, I mean, it was cut too soon, way too green, not enough color developed. So those are things you want to look for. Are there some flowers at the base, depending on what type of flower it is? Delphinium, snapdragon, right? Canterbury bells, campanula, right? Those kinds of things. Are they starting to open, or are they all super duper budded and maybe they're not quite ready yet? So that's something you want to keep in mind. Or is it something that's way too open? Like I remember particularly zinnias, when we would cut zinnias. I remember thinking, these zinnias are fine. These zinnias are totally beautiful. These are fine. And I was told, nope, you can't cut these because as soon as they're showing pollen, they're too far along to sell to like florists or to the general public. And you know, even though I was like, but I really don't think so. I really think they're still good. There's a marked difference between how long the zinnia would last when we cut it before there was any of the yellow pollen showing versus when we cut it and there was marked difference in how long it lasted in the vase. So these are things that you will need to be on the lookout for and deciding. Lilac. I've been picking on lilac a lot. It's just because we love, right? We kid because we love. Lilacs have to be open a certain amount all the way up the stem. Like I like to think of it, and I'm sure there's a rule on this. Again, I'm not like a flower farmer. It's probably got to be like 2/3 of the way bloomed or open before you cut it. If it doesn't have enough, I'm just going to call it juice. If it doesn't have enough juice and energy, If it's not open more than halfway, it'll never open. You cut it and it just wilts in the vase. And then people go, my lilac never lasts. Well, it was cut way too soon, right? Or it's all the way open, all the way to the tip. You missed it. It's not going to last. You can cut it. You can try it, right? You can cut it. You can put it in your cooler. You can keep it on your table and see how long it lasts. But the more open it is all the way, the less time it's going to have once you cut it. All right, so those are a couple of tips about just the maturity. Is it too mature? Is it under mature? And you're going to have to go by the wise words of my friend Francoise Weeks and try it. Try it. 2 words, so wise. Try it. We as florists sometimes go, well, I don't know how this is going to turn out. Well, I guess I'll never know, right? It's like, how many licks does it take to get to the Tootsie Roll center of a Tootsie Pop? The world will never know. Just try it, right? Just try it. Give it a try. Cut the lilac. Cut it at different stages. Experiment. Fail. I give you permission to kill some flowers because you cut them too early or too late. You have to sort of see for yourself. And once you start doing it, and again, if you're a florist and you've been a florist for a while, you kind of know. You kind of know. We get a little sixth sense around this. We can tell if something's opening or on its way out, all right? All right, time of day is also something to consider. So maturity of the plant and then time of day. Ideally, you don't want to cut, the short of it is you don't want to cut when it's the hottest part of the day. Noon, beating sun, worst time of the day to go out and cut the flowers because they're transpiring, okay? I'm giving you all kinds of words during this newbie series. They're transpiring, right? They are letting out their energy. They're letting out their moisture because they're getting all the heat coming in. So when the moisture is naturally coming out of your flowers, right, they're through transpiration, if you're cutting them at that maximum amount of transpiration, they just don't have the best chance of survival when you cut them. It doesn't mean they won't survive. It doesn't mean farmers don't cut at noon, okay? It doesn't mean it's a death sentence for your flowers. But if given the choice, I cut my flowers in the morning or in the evening when it's cooler or just any time of day that isn't the hottest time of today. That's the general rule. And if I need it and it's noon, I go out and cut it, all right? That's just the bottom line. But if we're trying to plan for how do we do this, not the hottest time of the day is when we want to do this. All right, and then finally, something that I consider, well, hold on, let me back up. So then once I cut it, then I decide how I'm going to process it, right? So usually what I'll do, because I'm not cutting a ton of stuff, I'll bring a little bucket with me. Bring one of the short black buckets with me out into, I was going to say the field, old farm hand reference there, but out into the garden, and I'll cut the peonies and put them straight into the bucket. Or I cut the mint especially, I cut and put straight into water. Then I'll bring it in. I'll clean it up a little bit, right? Removing foliage that falls below the water line. I'll put it into fresh, just clean water, especially something like mint, lilacs, things that are maybe gonna wilt. I put them straight into the cooler. So let me pause here for a second. People have been asking recently, can you use a non-florist cooler as a cooler? Can you use a beverage cooler for your flowers? And the truth is yes, right? Like it's not ideal, right? I should tell you, you should have a florist cooler because of humidity. However, I have never ever in my life worked for a flower shop that did not have a beverage cooler. So florists obviously use beverage coolers. It is done. Tip is you want to make sure that you have a bucket of water in the cooler at all times. So last week I talked about freshness, how to cut flower, how long they last. And one of the things we talked about was how you can cut peonies and store them dry. Even if you're going to put them dry into your beverage cooler, I would put a bucket of water in the cooler. Even if the flowers aren't in the water, just a bucket of water in the cooler is better than none, all right? So I will put my lilac, my mint, my oregano, the things that are, let's see, like the lady's mantle, I think tends to kind of like being in the cooler. Sometimes I'll just put them in there for 45 minutes, an hour, 15 minutes if that's all I got. But I put them in there just to give them that quick chill. And then I will just use them and put them in arrangements. So here's a little technicality. How will I use it? So that's the third thing. Maturity, time of day, and how will I use it, right? These are things I consider. So is it going in a bouquet? So if it's going in a bouquet, for example, the mint, I might cut it, use it right away, put it in the bouquet. And then I always store my bouquets in the cooler, whereas I don't have room for my centerpieces in the cooler a lot of times, so I don't necessarily store those in the cooler. So I can put those, I'll just put the bouquet right into the cooler, and then I know the flowers are kind of getting their chill time, like they're chilling the whole time that now I have them, right? If they're gonna go into a centerpiece, I'm more inclined to chill the flowers first and then design them in the centerpiece. So I hope that makes sense on that little piece. But yeah, am I gonna use them in a boutonniere? Are they gonna be tucked in a centerpiece? Are they gonna be in the bouquet? Are they gonna be in a floral bracelet? Like, how am I using it is going to determine what I do with it in terms of processing. So I hope that helps. Let's see, okay, I have a question here. Can I ask about washing flowers to get bugs and dust off, or am I overthinking this? No, you're not overthinking it at all. So I'm actually really glad you said that. So washing them off. So first of all, I always inspect for bugs. This is another reason to put it in the cooler. So a lot of times it'll slow bugs down, or they kind of come out and you're like, right? You want to definitely inspect for bugs, okay? So I'm super duper glad you asked that question. Sometimes they're hiding under the leaf, right? Sometimes under a leaf, you're gonna find a web and bugs underneath there. So you wanna look before you cut, right? You wanna make sure you know what you're cutting. When it comes to washing, you can rinse things off, you can dunk them in water. Like let's just say you found something that had something under the petal, a hosta. Let's say I picked my hosta leaves, and on the back of the leaf, there's something that's got a web kind of going, but the leaf itself isn't damaged. I would absolutely put that like in a bucket of water and pull off anything on the back of it. As long as it's not damaged, I can use it. But here's a really important tip. If you've washed the flowers, or if you had to cut them when it's wet and rainy, sometimes in the morning, because I'm telling you, hey, cut it when it's not super hot. Well, again, the transpiration hasn't happened where you haven't had evaporation from the leaves, right? Things get dewy at night. So if you're cutting things and they're dewy, you don't want to put things that are wet or dewy into the cooler, because it's no bueno, right? I was going to say it'll freeze, but that's not exactly it. It doesn't exactly freeze because your cooler hopefully is not freezing temperature. But it does create, just like an inhospitable environment, it can get slimy and wet. So if you do, let's say, I have these hostas and I'm cleaning them off by rinsing them, right? Even if I'm just dunking them, and I'm like, oh, perfect. I'll put them in front of a fan. That's something I learned on the farm. We would put just like a fan lightly blowing and rotate the bucket so that the flowers are not wet when they go into the cooler. And yeah, that's how I would do it. Just make sure that they are not wet. Or if I'm gonna rinse off the hosta leaves and they're going in a centerpiece and they're never going in the cooler, well, heck, I'll just throw them right in there wet if I want to. I do what I want. But you know, it's all the pieces together, right? They all come together. Is the product mature? Is it cut at the right time of day? Is it wet when it's going in the cooler? How long is it going in the cooler? And how am I using this for the end product? So if it's something that is, sometimes I'll cut like a fairly large piece off of my lilac and put it in a bucket, and it never goes into the cooler and it does just fine, but I'm still not gonna necessarily put it into a centerpiece, but it might make its way into the ceremony arbor or, you know, something else where it's like a little more showy, but I know that I don't need it to last all night. You know, I don't need 5 or 8 more hours out of this thing. It's just going to last, and heck, it probably will last all day. as I admitted last week, I'm a freshness snob. So I want to make sure the centerpiece doesn't start to look dead before the end of the night. And again, sorry, Lilac, but I'm looking at you. We got to be extra mindful with things like that. So anyway, yeah, that's it. Those are my tips for you. I hope that that's helpful if you are going to cut things from your own garden to use. And actually, I realized part of the question was framed like this. How do I go about cutting flowers that I'm going to use on Saturday? So because it's that specific, let me end with this little bit of additional specificity. I cut whenever I need them. So if I know on Wednesday that I need lilac, I'll probably cut them on Wednesday. I might cut them on Thursday. Again, I'm going to look at their maturity. All the things I already said, I'm going to look at those things and consider those things. But if I need it Friday, I'll cut it Friday. If it's perfect on Tuesday and my cooler's running, I'll cut it on Tuesday and stick it in the cooler. It'll last. Again, go back and watch last week's video on how long do flowers last if you want some extra tips on that aspect. But, I'll put them in the cooler and I can expect something that I cut early in the week to be fine on Saturday. But if I need to cut it on Friday, I will. I won't cut it Saturday morning for Saturday. Again, unless I'm like super desperate. I'm like, if I just had 2 more pieces of mint per centerpiece, my life would be complete, which I'm not going to lie, has happened. I have had that thought in my life. Then I will cut the mint. I will put it in the cooler, let it, get firmed up a little bit, at least an hour, before I then plunk them into those centerpieces. Or it might even be something where I bring it with me and do it on site after seeing how it performed on the car ride over. Because I don't like to make extra work for myself. I don't want to put them in and then have to take them all out. All right, so that's that. Family Flowers is super helpful. Thank you. You are so welcome. And again, thank you for that question, because the wetness is a really good thing to make sure people know. Don't put your flowers in the cooler when they're wet. So thank you for that. And yeah, I will see you with more tips soon. I'll be honest. This week got crazy. Homeschool, virtual school. We're on track. We're doing great. But so I don't know when the next tip is coming, but I'll give you a heads up here on Instagram, okay? Could even be tomorrow. Who knows? I got a bunch in the lineup. And if you have a question for me, head to the link in my bio. You can submit a question anonymously for this newbie series, and you can always DM me. You can message me directly too if you would like. Okay. Thank you for watching. Keep doing beautiful work. And you'll find more stuff over on my website at realflowerbusiness.com. Of course, thanks for being here, and I will see you next time.